When determining who my interview subjects were going to be, I decided to narrow down the search and focus solely on women, and even more specifically on military spouses who own their own businesses. As a military spouse myself, I have always had an extreme respect for those women who, despite the circumstances brought upon them by their spouse's military career and all the uncertainty and constant change that comes with it, will still work tirelessly to make their entrepreneurial goals come to fruition. So, as we have learned so far from our class, taking the leap into entrepreneurship is not without its own challenges. Then you add to that the fact that these women sometimes are managing a household, many times while their spouses are deployed for months, family obligations, and cross-country or even cross-world moves. We can then begin to understand just how exceptional it is for these women to have thriving businesses. The two women that were kind enough to provide insight into their entrepreneurial lives own two very distinct businesses. First, I have Carrie Everett, who founded Mrs. E Teaches Math in 2012. She is a mother of two kids under 5 years old and a Navy wife. With a bachelor's degree in mathematics and a master's degree in theoretical statistics, Carrie mentions how her plan was never to be a teacher, but after the housing bubble burst in the 2000s, she made the move to be a math teacher. Carrie runs an online store as well as a blog. The bulk of her income comes from selling math programs and learning resources intended to be used by math teachers. She also makes ad revenue from her blog. The second entrepreneur I interviewed is Heather Lantier, and she has owned Dreadnought Designs since 2016. She is also a mother and a Navy wife. Originally from Southern California, Heather currently resides and runs her business from Washington, D.C. Heather's business is an online boutique store where she sells handmade custom order clothing and various other fabric items. The challenges facing these two entrepreneurs were to be expected, and even though their respective businesses are quite different, one thing they do have in common is that they can both be described as lifestyle or family pathway entrepreneurs. Their businesses cater to their family's needs and mold into their very unique lifestyles. For both these women, their typical workday changed as their business grew. But interestingly enough, the change was the opposite of each other. For example, Carrie, the owner of Mrs. E Teaches Math, talked to me about how her typical day looks like now versus when she first started. She confessed she's a bit embarrassed about what that looks like now because she seems to work less now that her business is well established. The reason for this is that when she was first starting, the process of developing all the new programs was more demanding. Although she admits the time commitment is not as hard as it was at the beginning, she still finds herself working most evenings late and regularly ends her days well after midnight. Because of this success, Carrie has had the need to hire an assistant and enlisted the help of a fellow teacher to generate new programs. So for Heather, on the other hand, who owns Dreadnought Designs, she finds herself in the situation where the more successful her shop became, the more time commitment she had to give to her business. Heather has enlisted the help of other Navy spouses and is now employing 3 other women. She still has to set herself strict timelines to follow because her customers expect items to arrive within a certain time frame, and because of the nature of some of her products being custom order, it is very important to stay on top of these deadlines. Carrie and Heather have a lot in common with the entrepreneurs I focused while researching the podcast How I Built This. Julie Rice and Elizabeth Cutler are the original founders of SoulCycle. Although their business is completely different from Carrie and Heather's, what they do have in common are their beginnings and how they were all in different career paths from what ultimately led them to entrepreneurship. Julie, for example, was a talent agent, and Elizabeth did acupuncture while also doing real estate on the side. Both were in their 30s, married, and with young children at home. Despite all this, they were all hungry to start something new in their lives. One of the amusing aspects of starting a business is what goes into naming it. For example, the founders of SoulCycle talked about how they struggled to come up with a name for a long time, and ultimately it was Elizabeth's husband that suggested SoulCycle. For Heather, her company's name Dreadnought Designs came from Navy traditions, since dreadnought is a type of ship in the early 20th century. For Carrie, on the other hand, she cautions new businesses to think about names carefully. She confesses that Mrs. E teaches math, which is just intended to be a placeholder because she couldn't think of a good business name at the time. Eventually, she says it just stuck, and she is 9 years into her business with no intentions of rebranding. Ultimately, what I have gathered from these women is that your networks, both your personal and professional, are the most important assets you may have. No matter how unique or innovative your ideas, there is always someone out there who has been there, done that, or who can help you to solve the problems and grow your business in ways you never could have imagined on your own. What all these women do have in common is the drive to improve their lives and their family's situation. On a personal note, one of the things that I am taking away from this is that as women, we may sometimes feel like we are conditioned to not mention our successes for fear of being labeled as arrogant. However, I do think that achievements need to be celebrated and talked about more openly. I will leave you with what Carrie said about the first time she made her first $10,000 in 1 month. She remembers how she just kind of panicked because she couldn't believe it. But afterwards, she began to get comfortable with the fact that she was truly running a real business and she was exceeding her monetary goals, and it was just not an accident. She made that happen. All her planning, testing of her products with fellow teachers, and marketing efforts culminated in achieving the goals that she set for her business.